What's up, boys? Welcome to the 2020 fantasy season. Hopefully, this one will not be too altered by Corona. But yeah, this is the first League Manager's Note of the year. We're going to be doing the draft recap, we're doing power rankings as usual, and I'm going to recap what I think were the best and worst picks of the draft. Here we go. So, to start us off with the first pick, we have Aidan, who, because he had first pick, got CMC. And honestly, any team with CMC is a contender just because of how ridiculous he was last year. Like in half PPR, he was almost 100 or he actually might have been 100 points over the next closest running back, which is just crazy. If he repeats that, Aiden's gonna be like an insane team. I really like going Lamar Jackson and Mike Evans in the next two rounds. Think that's like making the team pretty well rounded. If Lamar is able to repeat what he did last year, his MVP season, then Aiden's going to have the two highest point scorers in fantasy on his team, which obviously is quite a good thing. But after the first three rounds, I'm not a huge fan. I didn't like James Conner in the fifth round at pick 41, and I think going a wide receiver might have been better because people kind of like pigeonhole themselves into this idea that like you need to have a running back at flex when in reality it's just like not terribly true. And that leaves Aiden with Michael Gallup as his wide receiver too, which he's okay. He's an underrated player, but like you don't know how that offense is going to work with CeeDee Lamb now. I think it could work out. It definitely could, but you're asking a lot out of a player who's really only had one like decent season so far. He also has Hunter Henry, who without Philip Rivers, it remains to be seen how he's going to play. David Johnson on a new team, hasn't been able to do training camp with his new team because of Corona. And on the bench, there's really no star player. Tyler Boyd's pretty good. If AJ Green, if AJ gets injured, Tyler Boyd will be pretty good. But there's not much running back depth, and you have two pretty injury-prone running backs as with Johnson and Connor. Overall, it's a pretty good draft. We'll have some very, very good weeks and probably some down weeks just in the nature of the team. Next on the list, at the number two pick, auto picking, was CROD, as per usual. It's a really good team. Saquon at two is a great pick, obviously. I mean, the top two are pretty locked in this year. I love Kenyon in the third. Kelsey is honestly such a steal at 19 overall. He's such a good player. My main like my main comment I would say on the team is even though the wide receivers are good, like there's not like one safe wide receiver, if that makes sense. Like Amari Cooper had some incredible weeks last year, but he also had some weeks where he just like I think there was one week he just straight up didn't catch a ball. Like so putting him at wide receiver one, it's not necessarily a bad thing because again he has some spectacular weeks, but he is a wide receiver who, if you're depending on him to be your one, will lose you games. AJ Brown was a rookie last year. I mean, almost won Offensive Rookie of the Year. Great season, but like again, he has some good weeks, some down weeks. Tua Hilton is basically a lock for an injury in the past couple of years, and he has a new quarterback. I think Philip Rivers will probably help him, but he needs to stay healthy. Um, yeah, honestly, but like with that being said, the team itself has a really good starting lineup. I obviously like I think Josh Allen is a good starting quarterback. I think he went too late probably in the draft. I think he was better than some quarterbacks taken before him. But I don't know. I have a lot of problems with the bench. I don't think David Montgomery is very good. I'm gonna be honest. I don't think he'll be great filling in. Debo Samuel needs to get healthy. I never once would be confident starting Marvin Jones or Mike Williams. They're just boomer bust players, and that boosts their like player ranking, even though you're not ever going to be happy starting them. I mean, the starting lineup's super good. I think Saquon Kenyon is easily like at worst a top three running back group, but yeah, I don't know. CROD's gonna have to like this team's gonna have to be well managed to go far, but I think it does definitely have the potential to. So at third pick, we had Ethan, who I think had a really good draft. I really like the style of getting way more flex position players during a year where you're probably going to have more uncertainty with your roster than ever, even though that sucks. It's probably the truth. So the first two rounds are just really good. Zeke going at third, it's pretty obvious, but Eckler falling in the second round is really good. I do think he's a bit overrated just because you don't know how much production he's going to get with Tyrod Taylor. If he's able to repeat the amount of receptions he had last year while getting more carries, then yeah, he's going to be like a borderline running back like one. He's going to be super good. But like that's not necessarily a guarantee. And he also has to stay healthy with his increased workload, which isn't also isn't a certainty, even though he has been a very healthy running back in his career. I think DJ Moore in the third round was a bit early, but again, I understand like why that pick was made. I think taking him over Adam Thielen is a fine pick. I don't fault it. It's just taking him as the third pick in the second round, or sorry, third round is a bit early for DJ Moore, I think. Keenan Allen's good. He was definitely a steal. DK Metcalf's good. Le'Veon's fine. Jarvis Landry's better in PPR. I think Jordan Howard and Emmanuel Sanders are both great late round picks. And, a lot of people don't really care about late rounds, but those are two that are definitely going to help out this season. I think both can be filled in at flex and put up decent weeks and won't just like outright lose you a game if you have to start them. I think the only really like weakness with this team is when you go for such a deep roster and flex, you're gonna have bad quarterback, tight end. I don't have much faith in Evan Ingram. Like I know he's good. I just don't think he I don't know. Any tight end that's not in the top five, honestly, I just don't really like, which is just I don't know. That's just how I feel. Carson Wentz, he's good. I'm assuming this team is going to stream quarterbacks based on matchup. That just seems to be how it's going to go. I think that's a risky strategy because quarterbacks are often underestimated how important they are for your points, just because you can, I don't know, you can get a lot. But yeah, this really good lineup, probably the deepest team in the league. We'll see how important that depth is as the season goes on, but definitely a good draft. At fourth pick, we had Dylan, and where do I begin with this draft? Oh my God. Okay, first of all, if you're gonna go double wide receiver, this is not the year to do it. I don't care. Like, I do not. All right, first of all, do not fault Mike Thomas at all in the first round. Think it's a great pick, even at number four. I think it's a fine pick, especially in half PPR. Think he's a great player. He will probably be the wide receiver one again. I expect him to repeat that. I don't see maybe Devontae Adams, but I don't see who else would even like challenge him. He's just in such a good system. But Chris Godwin in the second round, it's a change. Like I think Godwin's definitely better than Evans, but there's that competition there. There's no guarantee that he's going to repeat the season he had last year. I mean, I know he's good, and I expect him to definitely be a top 10 receiver, but you're taking him in the second round and you're doubling up on receivers, which like I don't think Godwin's a bad pick in that spot, but you look at his running back one and it's Clyde, Edwards-Helaire. And again, if like if you went double running back and then picked Clyde in the third round, I would be saying like, I respect the risk. But if you're building a two receiver first round team, you want consistent running backs who will not lose you games and like let your receivers outscore the other team. But you picked like the riskiest running back in the draft. I mean, And then you had the audacity in the fourth round to say, I can wait longer. And he went Juju. Like he went Juju. And then in the fifth round, he went Mark Andrews. I just don't get it. Like I don't understand what Dylan was like. This is a super risky draft. The fact that and his running back two is literally like Kareem Hunt, who's a running back two on his own team. I think Kareem Hunt's a fine player, but you want consistent running backs in a wide receiver heavy team. I just I don't get it. I don't get what Dylan was trying to do here. I think Damian Williams in the 10th round is a steal when you have Clyde on your team, but Dylan, there wasn't enough prep. I'm gonna be honest. Okay, like just for fun, because I actually think fourth pick was super good this year. I kind of mocked up like what Dylan could have done with his draft, even with the two receiver. So he could have gone Michael Thomas in the first, Chris Godwin in the second. That's fine. And again, I don't have problems with those picks specifically. If he had taken Miles in the third, who I will admit does not have as much upside as Clyde Edwards-Helaire, there's a chance Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be a top like 10 running back, top 5 maybe, if everything pans out in the way, especially at the end of the season. And like I even kept Juju in the fourth, even though I really don't agree with that pick, because I mean, if you want to stack wide receivers and you like Juju's an insane flex to have in this league, but it's just I don't know. And then you could have rounded it out with Melvin Gordon, super steady running back two, very high ceiling or very high floor, which is what you need. Like this team, I think is way better than what Dylan drafted. These are all players he could have drafted. He passed up on, and even I, I still don't think Dylan's draft was terrible. I don't think there's one pick that's especially egregious, but I think it could have been better, which disappoints me. Okay, Dylan got a lot of talking, but let's move on to the fifth pick, Charlie. So Charlie at five sat and took Dalvin, which I agree. Skill-wise, Dalvin is certainly a top five player, probably top four. The problem is he is considering holding out, and especially this year when players can literally opt out of playing, I think Dalvin is an extremely risky pick. I personally would have taken Kamara at five. That's just me. I think that you got a similar skill level, and one is a lot safer than the other. I will say, I like how he grabbed Madison. Madison, I think he took him in the 11th. Absolute steal there. Probably should have gone earlier. Great insurance policy. And I really like the starting lineup. I think that there's not really a weakness. Dak is a very good fantasy quarterback. Darren Waller, top five tight end. After that, there's a huge drop off. Lockett's a great flex. I think that Cooper Kupp might have been taken a bit too early. He was taken, if I recall, in the fourth round. I think he's good. He's just good. I think Kenny Galladay also taken a bit early. He was Charlie's second round pick. Both are good receivers, and I have no problem with if you're confident in a player that you really want, taking them before their ADP, especially when you can round out the team. The problem I have with Charlie's lineup is he took perhaps the riskiest first round pick, Dalvin Cook, until he signs his contract. Or I guess that's an if, not an until, but whatever. And to secure his insurance, he took Madison, which is good. But he has four running backs on his roster. I refuse to count Adrian Peterson. And two are on the same team. And one is Keyshawn Vaughn, who's a rookie that's not the week one starter. Like, there's no running back depth on this team whatsoever. None to speak of. So you're putting an enormous amount of faith into Dalvin Cook, who has had, out of his 3 seasons, one healthy season. I I respect it, honestly. I think it's a huge risk, but you're putting yourself in a position where you could win the league and you're not just playing for like fourth place in the playoffs. And I like that. I like that move. I think this is a good draft. I think it's a good team. I just think that maybe in the later rounds we could have gotten a bit better running back depth and not taken the Ravens defense so early. But It was a good draft. Okay. Outside of the top four picks, the pick I would have selected first was sixth pick. Joe got sixth pick and he auto picked. And when I was writing notes by everybody's draft, I did pretty diligent notes for Joe. I just wrote, love it. It's like he got such a good team. Alvin Kamara at six is so good. So good. You know what you're going to get. Huge boost for half PPR for Kamara. He's so good. And oh my God, Joe's receivers are Tyreek Hill, Adam Thielen, and Allen Robinson. The fact that he was able to get them, like Allen Robinson falling to the fourth round, Adam Thielen falling to his pick in the third, like this is such a good wide receiver group. And he was able to like secure his running back. Like Joe, oh my God, I'm so mad that Joe auto picked Melvin Gordon because Melvin Gordon was who I wanted in the fifth to like as my flex. But Melvin Gordon is Joe's running back two, and I love it. For a wide receiver heavy team, you have a running back two with a super high floor. I love it. It makes perfect sense. I really like this team and very good depth. Let me add Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team. It needs to be pointed out. Devin Singletary is great depth. If James White does what he does last season, great pickup. Even his receivers on a bench, not bad. The only thing that I can really say as a negative about Joe's team is he's starting Jared Cook. And I will tell you right now, Jared Cook should not be starting as a tight end. I do not trust it. He's basically a touchdown or bust tight end. Will not get many catches, especially with Emmanuel Sanders on the Saints now. He just won't catch very many passes in a half PPR league. And that's kind of what you want. I understand that after, like, I keep saying it, but after the top five tight ends, massive drop off, and you basically have to pick who you want. And Joe auto picked, so Jared Cook was kind of just who he ended up with. But outside of tight end position, I personally love this team. I think this team will definitely make playoffs, probably go further. It's worth mentioning that when you have players like Alvin Kamara and Tyreek Hill, you're going to have some boom weeks. Like that's just the nature of the players. They're incredibly like fast playmakers. So I would be very nervous to play Joe this year. I think this Joe was the number two team in the regular season last year. I think he could look to repeat that. Okay, so I picked at seven, and personally for me, this obviously is a biased video. I mean, that should come as no surprise. Like I want to win, but I really love my draft, and I think the reason is because I planned basically every one of these picks. I This went almost exactly how I planned it. There are some switch ups. I didn't expect to get Mahomes, but like these are the players that I wanted this season, and I was able to get them. So that alone, like, it might not necessarily be a good thing in terms of fantasy, but like when I think about it, I think I had a really good draft, if that makes sense. I think Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs is arguably the best running back, like the two running backs in the league. Certainly top three. Ethan and CROD are also in the conversation, and you could debate it. But I like that duo a lot. Patrick Mahomes, as quarterback, is going to be a top two quarterback almost certainly. He was quarterback seven despite missing 3 weeks, and just in general not having as good of a regular season. Mark Ingram was drafted at like running back 24. He's going to be a top 20 running back. People are going to say that J.K. Dobbins will steal carries. It doesn't matter. Mark Ingram has never been a high volume running back, and he's always been good with the carries he's gotten. Like on the Saints, he was competing with Kamara, and like every year people were like, "Oh, Mark Ingram's not going to do that well because he has so much competition." And he kept being like a top 10 fantasy running back. He was running back 8 last year, and I expect a dip in touchdowns, but he's still going to be fine. And even if you're saying like J.K. Dobbins breaks out, I have J.K. Dobbins on my team too. The glaring weakness is receivers. I think Robert Woods is about as steady as you can get. I know exactly what to expect out of him. He'll be consistent, and with Gurley and Cooks gone, he's going to get a lot of targets. AJ Green is the huge question mark. I don't think anybody in this draft, like I heard the words AJ Green sucks at the draft, I don't think anybody is questioning AJ Green's skill. When AJ Green's on the football field playing and he's healthy, AJ Green is a stud of a receiver. And I don't think anybody's really questioning that. The obvious question is his health. Like, will he stay healthy? You you never know. And but I'm not gonna like shy away from a player just because there's a chance he gets injured. I like I don't like that style of play, and you can say that that's bad fantasy, but I think that drafting talent is good. So I got Brandon Cooks as a backup receiver who I'm shocked fell to the eighth round. He's been a top 15 receiver for the past 5 years. He's on a new team with Deshaun Watson, not much competition for targets. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins just left, so I don't expect him to fill that void. I was able to get a top four tight end, and any of the tight ends in the top five all are just like massive tier above the ones behind them. I was able to get a good kicker, good defense. Really happy with that duo. Will Lutz, super good, top two in my opinion. I just really like this team. I think that a lot of people like when you're criticizing my team will point to AJ Green, and while I agree he's not necessarily as safe as some other receivers, I think that he's definitely should not be pointed out as a weakness when he's healthy, which currently he is. So that's my draft. Uh, Obviously, I like it. Okay, at 8, welcome to the league, Kellen Meager. Um, Looking at the draft, I have to say, not a major fan. When I will say when you're drafting over call and you can't see your draft board, it is a like added difficulty because you can't like prepare for what other people are picking. You're just kind of put on the spot in the moment, and that's just a shitty situation to be in. And I completely understand that like if you're going to use that as an excuse. I think Nick Chubb, Julio Jones, the first two rounds is just maybe the most boring thing you could do. I mean, they're both very high volume players. Maybe not many touchdowns out of the both of them, but I think both are very solid picks, very, very high floors, which if you're in your first year in the league and you want to show that you're like a good manager, that's fine with me. Um, Love the Kittle pick in the third round. He fell too far. That's a fantastic pick, even if I think George Kittle as a football player is overrated. Uh, George Kittle in fantasy should not have fallen to 28, I think. That's a great pick. Odell in the fourth, I have no personal problems with it. I think obviously the ceiling is sky high. I think he will improve on his performance last season for sure. Um, in the fifth, Jonathan Taylor. Again, I don't have a problem with it, even if it is a riskier pick. He has to win the job from Marlon Mack. If he is able to fully win and it's not a committee, fantastic pick. Colts line is great. If Marlon Mack didn't exist, I think Jonathan Taylor would be a borderline first round pick. Stephon Diggs, another risky pick. It's a new team for Stephon. You just aren't really quite sure. I think Russell Wilson was taken a bit too early. And on the bench, the only really asset I trust is Hollywood Brown. Other than that, not much depth. So overall, I think this draft, there's not much of a ceiling, really. There's a couple players like Odell and Jonathan Taylor who do have high ceilings. But when you pick steady first round picks, I think you're just hoping that you make playoffs and you're able to kind of adjust your team later in the season, which not a bad strategy at all. Just being able to win the first couple weeks is really good, and picking players where you know the production you're going to get is definitely a good strategy. But I, I just like when I'm looking at the other teams, it's hard for me to rank this one above a lot of them, just because I really like to look at the upside of players. So again, I don't like by any means think this is a bad draft. I can't point to one pick and say absolutely that it's a mistake. So, not a bad start. Okay, number 9, it was Nick drafting. And I I just don't know. All right, so Nick went running back heavy, which I think for this year was the correct decision. So he took Aaron Jones in the second, Chris Carson in the third, Fournette in the fourth. you pick. I don't particularly love any of the running backs. I think each one I expect to do worse than they did last season. Aaron Jones will not repeat his touchdowns. Leonard Fournette is going to be behind every game, and game script won't favor him because the Jaguars suck now. And Chris Carson, health is a big concern. He was good last season, and he's an underrated player, I will say. He's definitely an underrated like running back in real life. But I just don't know. And DeAndre Hopkins is on a new team. He hasn't probably had enough opportunities to practice with Kyler Murray yet. So I would have liked Devontae there, but I can understand if you don't want a Packers stack with Aaron Jones. Cortland Sutton's going to have way more competition for targets on the Broncos now. I think there's great wide receiver depth on this team. I think Devontae Parker and Julian Edelman both dropped too far. I think my main problem with this team is Tyler Higbee. He was taken too early. He was taken too early. Tyler Higbee last year produced so well because Gerald Everett, the other tight end on the Rams, got hurt and he basically had to be thrust in. And also the Rams were just really behind in a lot of their games. If Higbee's able to repeat what he did in the back half of last season, this is a fine pick. In fact, he probably dropped a bit too far. But that's a big question. Like that's not like a certainty at all, and you're kind of banking on that when you take him in the sixth round. And like, I just, I don't know what to say with this draft. I think I am really hoping that Ryan Tannehill is just a meme on this team and he's not actually going to start week one because even though he had an insane finish that got him his contract at the end of the year, I don't I just don't know. They're better fantasy quarterbacks. And I know like this might just be a personal preference at quarterback, which after like the 10 are gone is fine. I just I don't know. I think John Brown was a great late round pick. I think Austin Hooper is a bit underrated. I think Marlon Mack is pretty good too. I I really just I don't particularly like this draft. I think some players I think hmm I wouldn't have picked three running backs who probably had their best season of their careers last year, is what I'm going to end on for this team. Okay, so Dan picked the 10th pick pretty early this year. He went back to back. And in the first round, I think he had a great one, too. I think Devontae fell too far. He should have gone at 8. And Joe Mixon is just perennially underrated because he plays on the Bengals and he's not a particularly flashy player. Both great picks. Then, in the third and fourth round, you went Todd Gurley and Calvin Ridley. Both of those players are taken far too early and had better alternative options available. I think both players are good. I think Todd Gurley will have if you can want to call it a bounce back season on the Falcons. He was still decent last year, but a bounce back season on the Falcons, I think Calvin Ridley will continue to improve. That being said, I don't think Calvin Ridley should have gone 31st overall. I don't think Todd Gurley should have gone 30th overall. Both were a bit of a reach. I like DJ Chark in the fifth, but after that, I'm looking at this team, and I don't know. Raheem Mostert, while he has talked to the front office, has not gotten a pay raise yet, so that's a risky pick. DeAndre Swift is a rookie who has to compete with Kerryon Johnson. That's another risky pick. Ronald Jones, if he wins the starting job, could be great. Deontay Johnson, if he has good chemistry with Big Ben Roethlisberger, could be great. Matt Breida, if he's able to get carries from Jordan Howard, could be good. Zach Moss, if Devin Singletary um starts doing poorly, or if he gets the goal line work, will be a good pick. But it's just so many ifs on the bench, which I like taking shots on your bench. I understand that, but you want to have some consistency, especially when like your running backs, or Todd Gurley is an injury-prone running back. I think. I actually don't know if that's for certain, but I know he has the knee arthritis. Uh, I don't know. I think Kyler Murray is underrated. That was probably a good pick. But you just can't start Noah Font in a 10-team league at tight end. You can't do it. You can't justify that to me. I will say I think he's underrated. I think he's maybe a top 14 tight end, maybe top 12, but he's in the starting lineup, and that's not a good thing. You want to watch a couple weeks of Noah Fant and see if he's getting that increase in volume that he needs to be a good player. You don't want to run him out week one and just, you know, I think there are a lot of problems with this draft. I don't think it's necessarily as bad as some people might say just because of the Gurley Ridley picks in the third and fourth. But it's just, if you're going, I don't know. It could have been better, I think. Okay, moving on to power rankings. I will say beforehand that the preseason power rankings are incredibly hard to come up with because each team looks around the same. It's honestly just a preference thing. Um, yeah, but I think I'm pretty satisfied with where I have each team. But to start off, I feel very confident that number 10 is Dylan. I just don't know with this draft. I will say that this is one of the first times where I truly believe a number 10 team has potential to be great. I just think there's way too much risk with this draft for pretty much no reason. It could have been a really stacked team, but Dylan just went ahead and picked Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the third round after going double receiver, which is a really bold choice. I do feel a bit bad about my number 9, seeing as I feel like he just always finds his way to the bottom of the power rankings at some point in the season. But it's none other than Dan at 9. It just just a couple too many reach picks. I'm looking at the roster and I just don't see it. I just don't see enough like talent for me to have him higher in the rankings. I think Cridley and Gurley were not necessarily bad picks on their own, but just taken too early, and it's a weird Falcons stack without Julio. All right, at number 8, getting his first taste of potential league manager's note bias, I have Kellen. I think Chubb and Julio, both fine picks in the first 2 rounds. Really nothing to be excited about. Both, I would say, have lower ceilings than most first round picks, even though technically Chubb was a second, but like it was ninth overall, so he's basically a borderline first. Kittle was great in the third. I love that pick. But other than that, honestly, I'm not just ecstatic about any of these selections. Jonathan Taylor could be good. Odell could be good. Stephon could be good. It's just like there's not really any certainty with this lineup, and I just have it at 8. Okay, coming in at 7, we have a bit of a fall from grace here. Last year's champion, which still hurts to say, Nick Zuga. I don't like the triple running backs. I think triple running back is a fine strategy. I don't like the running backs Nick did it with. I think each one of these running backs will probably have a worse year than last year. So it's just a lot of regression coming on this team. You have D Hop who hasn't played with his new team at all, and you picked Ryan Tannehill as your starting quarterback. I don't like Tyler Higbee. I think he was taken too. I just really like. I'm gonna be honest. I'm looking at Nick's draft. I don't really like love any pick. Like I don't like any of them besides like maybe Julian Edelman. But other than that, I'm just not really a huge fan, honestly. Okay. I believe last year I had him at number 1 in the draft power rankings, but this year I have Aidan at 6. I I think the first 3 rounds, fantastic, very good picks. I loved Lamar, I loved Christian McCaffrey, and I loved Mike Evans. But after that, I just don't know. We've never seen David Johnson play good football for like 4 years. Michael Gallup is not a great wide receiver too. I'm not a huge fan, and James Conner needs to stay healthy and just play better football. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. I think the first 3 picks really just carry this team up the rankings, and I think Christian McCaffrey and Lamar alone will win Aiden enough games to make the playoffs, which is why I have him at the edge of playoffs at 6. Okay, at 5, I have CROD, which is weird because I think you could make a pretty convincing case that CROD has maybe the best roster in the league. I just think it's difficult to manage a team with only 4 running backs on the roster, one of whom is on Johnson, who just will not do anything, in my opinion. I don't particularly love the receivers. I think they're all essentially boomer bust candidates. I think Amari Cooper is probably a good pick for CROD. AJ Brown is okay. I don't know about T.Y. Hilton. He needs to stay healthy, but yeah, honestly, the roster is great. I just think it's a tough one to manage, and I have absolutely no confidence in CROD to manage it, but he's still at 5. Okay, I went back and forth between 4, 3, and 2 for a while making this list. I think each team is very close and even a little similar in how they're built. But at number 4, I ended up putting Ethan there. Extremely deep team, and if there's one team that I would say is almost a lock to make playoffs, it would be this one. I think going depth this year about like more than others is probably a very good idea. I'm looking at the starting roster, and I think there are maybe more question marks in it. I don't like Carson Wentz. I haven't seen Eckler play with a quarterback who's not named Philip Rivers yet, even though I do think he will be really good. Uh, Not a huge Evan Ingram guy, not a huge DK Metcalf guy, and I think DJ Moore was taken too early. I might have said that already, but I I I think it's a great team, and it's in the top 4 for sure, and definitely could have a case to be higher. I think the other 3 teams above it are slightly better. Okay, at number 3, I have Charlie. But I will say that if Dalvin Cook signs his contract, I think Charlie has a convincing case to be at least 2, if not 1. Dalvin Cook's contract is currently the reason I have him at 3. He's just an uncertainty. I don't know if he's going to play, and if there's one star player who's going to opt out of the season, it's probably going to be Dalvin Cook. Um, yeah, but I love the team. I think honestly, not a lot of weaknesses. I love Dalvin and Miles as 2 running backs. Not a lot of running back depth on this team, which is maybe the only weakness, but it's a very strong starting lineup. Without bye weeks or injuries, it's going to be really good, going to win a lot of games. Yeah, honestly, nothing much more to say. If Dalvin signs his contract, this team will definitely get a boost in the rankings. Okay, at number 2, I have myself. And I know I'm going to get shit for it. I always do, but last year I was super confident with my draft and everybody shit on me. So I ended up putting myself at 6 last year in the post-draft power rankings when I loved it and everybody else didn't. And I was just like, all right, maybe they have a point. So I put myself at the edge of playoffs because I thought that like I could just work my way in even with a bad team, which I didn't think I had in the first place. This year, I think I have a great team. I got another draft that I loved, and like I haven't gotten the shit for my draft. So I'm assuming that other people agree with it, even though they haven't said that. But yeah, I think this team is really strong. I love Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs first 2 rounds. That was what I really wanted to do. Yeah, I love Patrick Mahomes falling to me in the third, Zach Ertz falling to me in the fifth. I loved Woods in the fourth. And yeah, I think that when you have a team whose weakness is one of the most talented wide receivers in the league, then that's not really a bad situation. Obviously, AJ Green needs to stay healthy for my team to do well, which is probably asking for too much, but so long as he remains healthy, I think myself at 2 is not too questionable. At number 1, if you didn't already figure it out, it is Joe Raddick. I am very upset that Joe auto-picked this draft because not only was he picking right before me, but he took a lot of players in the later rounds that I don't think Joe would have taken if he was there. But I think Alvin at 6, fantastic pick. Love that pick. I loved Tyreek in the second. Probably shouldn't have fallen to his pick in the second round. Thielen's fine for me in the third. Not overly a fan of it, but I think it's a great, I think it's still a good pick. Allen Robinson in the fourth, absolute steal. Probably should have been a third, late third, or very early fourth, but he fell to the mid fourth. Um, yeah, and I think my favorite pick in Joe's draft is Melvin Gordon. He was taken the pick before mine, which is so frustrating because I was planning on having Melvin Gordon be my flex, and I got auto pick snaked by Joe. Oh my God, that makes me so angry. But yeah, I was a huge fan of Melvin Gordon coming to this draft. He's probably going to make my top 10 picks list, and by probably, I mean he will be in the top five for sure. Yeah, I just love this team, and it's got great depth. I think Terry McLaurin on the bench is really good. I think Devin Singletary is really good. The only question mark, I think I talked about this in Joe's like draft analysis, is Jared Cook. Don't trust him at all, but I think when you only have a tight end weakness and not a tight end quarterback like kicker weakness, I think you can manage that, especially with such like a roster that I think will be really good. So Joe takes number one in the power rankings. That might be the first time ever. Okay, yeah, guys, that's going to be the first pre-draft league manager's note or video, I suppose. I hope you guys liked it. If you disagree with anything, please feel free. I really would love to debate fantasy football with you guys. You guys can expect some more videos coming out soon. I really want to do a top 10 best and worst picks in this draft, and maybe even do some like interviews of like why you picked who you did, because I honestly am very curious, Dylan, as to some of the decisions you made. And yeah, this video is way too long already, so I'm just gonna end it here. Thanks.